What if the reason you feel lost right now is because you were never meant to find your way back? Sit with that for a moment. Let it settle beneath the noise of your thoughts, the way sediment settles at the bottom of still water. Because somewhere inside you already know this isn't really about being lost. You've felt it for weeks, maybe months. That quiet static behind your eyes when you look at the life you built and wonder whose life it actually is. Maybe that is why the goals that once excited you suddenly feel empty. Why the people you once needed no longer feel familiar. Why the life you spent years building somehow feels like it belongs to someone else, someone you used to know, someone whose name you still answer to but whose skin no longer fits. And the strangest part is, nothing may look wrong from the outside. You still wake up, you still work, you still talk to people. You still move through the same streets, past the same buildings, under the same gray or golden sky. From the outside, the machinery of your life keeps turning. But somewhere inside, quietly, without ceremony, an older version of you is dying, not dramatically, not with fireworks or collapse. It's dying the way winter arrives, 1 degree at a time, until one morning you step outside and the air has changed and you can't remember exactly when it happened. And this is where most people make their biggest mistake. They panic. They mistake the death of an old identity for the failure of their entire life. They assume they are falling apart instead of falling away from something that no longer serves them. They call themselves lazy, unmotivated, confused, broken. They stare in the mirror at 3 in the morning, searching for the person who used to move through the world with such certainty. And when they cannot find that person, they assume they've lost themselves. But what if you haven't lost anything at all? What if you cannot go back, because you were never meant to? Let that idea move through you slowly, not as an answer, but as a door left slightly open. Because what if this emptiness you've been trying so hard to escape isn't the end of your direction? What if it's the space being cleared for a new one? There is a season in every meaningful life, quiet, unspoken, rarely discussed, when the old self has already died, but the new self has not yet arrived. It is a season without a name, a threshold, a hallway between 2 rooms, and you are standing in the dark, one hand still touching the door behind you, unable yet to find the handle of the door ahead. It feels like standing between 2 worlds. And if you are living through that strange silence right now, if the ground beneath your identity has gone soft, if your certainties have quietly dissolved, then what you are about to hear may explain something you have felt for a long time but never had the language for. You are not falling behind. You are in the middle of becoming. Now let's go deeper, because to understand what is happening to you, we have to go somewhere most people are afraid to look. Not at your circumstances, not at your job, your relationships, your bank account, the visible architecture of your life. We have to go beneath it, into the place Carl Jung once called the unconscious, the vast dark ocean beneath the small lit island of your everyday awareness. Because what is dying right now isn't happening on that island. It's happening in the depths. Every human being builds what we might call an identity structure, a scaffolding of beliefs, roles, ambitions, and self-images that we mistake for who we are. As a child, you absorbed it almost entirely from the outside. You were told what mattered. Achievement mattered. Being liked mattered. Being useful, being impressive, being safe. These became the load-bearing walls of your personality. And for a while, that structure works. It gets you through school, through your 20s, through the early architecture of adulthood. But structures built to survive are not always structures built to thrive. And at some point, quietly, without your permission, the deeper self begins a kind of renovation. It starts removing walls you thought were permanent. It starts questioning foundations you never thought to question. And because that renovation happens far beneath conscious awareness, all you feel on the surface is the tremor, the dust, the unsettling sense that something structural is shifting, even though you can't see the blueprint. This is why old ambitions suddenly taste like ash in your mouth. This is why relationships that once felt like home now feel like rooms you've outgrown, low ceilings pressing down on a version of you that has quietly grown taller. This is why success, the way you used to define it, no longer produces the relief it once promised. You are not losing yourself. An outdated version of yourself is losing its grip on you. And here is the part almost no one tells you. This isn't malfunction. This is metamorphosis. Somewhere in nature right now, a caterpillar is dissolving inside a chrysalis. Not transforming gracefully, cell by cell, the way children's books like to illustrate it. It is biologically dissolving, breaking down into a kind of soup, losing its entire structural identity before new cells, called imaginal cells, begin to organize a completely different creature. If you open that chrysalis in the middle of the process, you would not find a half caterpillar, half butterfly. You would find formless liquid. You would find collapse. And if that caterpillar could feel, could think, could narrate its own experience the way you narrate yours, it would swear it was dying. It would have no way of knowing that this collapse was the doorway to flight. You are inside that chrysalis right now. And I want you to notice, really notice, how tempting it is to interpret internal collapse as external failure. How easily the mind, uncomfortable with formlessness, reaches for a story that says something is wrong with me, rather than sitting inside the far more disorienting truth. Something is happening to me that I don't yet have the vocabulary for. This is where the second trap begins to close around you. Because once the internal ground starts shifting, the external world doesn't stay quiet about it. You look around and everyone else appears to be moving forward, getting promoted, getting married, buying houses, posting their milestones in bright, curated rectangles that scroll endlessly past your thumb at midnight. And you, mid-metamorphosis, dissolved and formless, feel the cold, specific shame of appearing to stand still while the whole world seems to walk on without you. But here is something worth sitting with. Visible progress is not the only kind of progress. In fact, the most important transformations in a human life often produce zero visible output for long stretches of time. No promotion, no new relationship, no Instagram-worthy milestone, just a slow, invisible reorganization of the self happening far beneath the surface anyone else can see. Think of a tree in winter. To a passerby, it looks lifeless. Bare branches against a colorless sky, nothing growing, nothing blooming, nothing to show for itself. But underground, in the dark, unseen soil, the root system is doing some of its most critical work, reaching deeper, gathering strength, preparing a foundation wide enough to support everything the tree will become in spring. If you judge that tree only by what's visible above ground in January, you would call it dead. You would be wrong. Or think of a ship crossing open ocean at night. From the shore, all you can see is a small constellation of lights gliding smoothly across a dark horizon, calm, almost still. But beneath the waterline, hidden from view, massive engines are turning, currents are being fought. A whole invisible architecture of effort is keeping that ship moving forward. The stillness on the surface is not the absence of motion, it is the disguise of motion. This is what is happening inside you right now, whether or not it shows up anywhere visible. This is why you can feel, in your bones, that something important is occurring, even while your resume, your relationship status, your outward achievements stay exactly the same. The most important movement of your life may currently be happening below the waterline, in rooms with no windows where no one, not even you fully, can see it yet. And this brings us to the part of the process that is, without question, the most difficult to walk through. Because before the new identity can be built, the old scorecard has to die. For most of your life, without ever consciously choosing it, you've been keeping score: achievement, money, recognition, productivity, approval. A silent internal ledger that tells you, moment to moment, whether you are winning or losing at being you. And for years, that scorecard worked. It gave you direction, motivation, a way to measure your worth against a world that rewards visible output. But right now, in this season, that scorecard has stopped producing meaning. You hit the number and feel nothing. You get the approval and it evaporates in seconds. You accomplish the thing you used to dream about, and instead of relief, there's this strange, hollow quiet, like applause in an empty theater. And here is the line I want you to actually let land. Not just here, you are judging your present life by the rules of a person you no longer are. Read that again, slower this time, and let it move past the surface of your mind into whatever room inside you has been quietly keeping score all these years. The scorecard isn't wrong because scorekeeping is wrong. It's wrong because it was written by someone whose priorities, wounds, and definitions of a meaningful life were shaped by circumstances you have already outgrown. Using that old scorecard now is like trying to read a map of a city that no longer exists. The roads have changed, the landmarks have been torn down, and yet you keep walking in circles, wondering why nothing matches the version in your hand. This is the part where you have to allow yourself something most people never permit themselves. The right to stop scoring the game by rules you didn't consciously choose, written by a version of you that circumstance built, not the version of you that's trying, right now in the quiet dark, to be born. And once that old scorecard begins to dissolve, you enter the strangest phase of all. The one almost no one talks about, because it's difficult to describe and even harder to admit out loud. You start to feel like a ghost, present in your own life but psychologically detached from it. You sit at the dinner table with people who love you, and some part of you is watching from a slight distance, like you're standing just behind your own shoulder. You go through the motions of your job, your routines, your conversations, and there's a strange transparency to it all, as if you could pass your hand through the walls of your own life and feel nothing but air. This is the ghost phase, the space between who you were and who you're becoming. And it is, without question, the loneliest room in the entire process of transformation, because you can't fully return to your old identity. The doors behind you have quietly sealed shut, but you haven't yet arrived at whatever is waiting ahead. You are, in the truest sense, in between. Not gone, not arrived, suspended, and the instinct when you feel this way is to fill it, to numb it with noise, with distraction, with a new relationship or a new job or a new city, anything to escape the unbearable weight of formlessness. We are, as a species, deeply uncomfortable with empty space. Silence unsettles us, stillness feels like danger. So we reach, compulsively, almost automatically, for anything that will make the emptiness go away. But I want you to consider a different question. One that will feel uncomfortable at first, and then, if you let it sit long enough, strangely liberating. What if this emptiness isn't something you need to fill? What if the ghost phase isn't a problem to be solved, but a threshold to be respected? Think of it this way. In the natural world, nothing meaningful grows in a rush. A seed does not sprout the moment it's planted. It sits in darkness, in soil, in conditions that from the outside look indistinguishable from nothing happening at all. If you dug it up every few days to check on its progress, out of anxiety, out of impatience, you would kill it before it ever had the chance to become anything. The ghost phase is your underground season, and every instinct you have to rush through it, numb it, or fill it with premature noise is in a strange and counterintuitive way an act of self-sabotage disguised as self-help. This is where the mind, uncomfortable with uncertainty, starts to demand something almost impossible: a plan, a 5-year plan, a clear map with clean lines and confident arrows pointing toward a destination you can name. You want someone, anyone, even yourself, to hand you a blueprint that says, here is who you become next, here is the next 10 steps, here is how the fog clears. But consider this. Any plan you could draw up right now would be drawn by the very identity that is currently dissolving. A 5-year plan built from the beliefs, fears, and definitions of your old self would not lead you somewhere new. It would simply reconstruct the old life in a slightly different shape. Foundation, same walls, just repainted. Certainty at this stage would not save you. Certainty would trap you. This is why the fog exists, not to punish you, not because you did something wrong. The fog exists because you are being asked, for perhaps the first time in your adult life, to discover instead of control, to feel your way forward instead of engineering your way forward. Your nervous system understandably hates this. Control has always felt like safety. But control, in this particular season, is not safety. It's a cage built from a self you're outgrowing, and it will only keep you circling the same familiar ground. So if you cannot plan your way out, and you cannot control your way through, what do? You stop searching for the map, and you start following the signs. This shift is subtle, but it changes everything. A map requires you to already know the destination. Signs only require you to notice what's in front of you, one step at a time. And in this season of your life, the signs rarely look like grand revelations. They look small, almost forgettable. A conversation that lingers in your mind for days without explanation. A subject you find yourself quietly curious about at midnight, for no practical reason at all. A stranger's sentence that seems to speak directly to something you haven't told anyone. A moment, brief, unexpected, where the noise in your chest goes quiet and something that feels almost like peace moves through you. These are not random. Your unconscious mind, the same deep intelligence that is currently dissolving your old identity, is also constantly sending signals. Quiet transmissions from a self that hasn't fully formed yet, but already knows, on some level, where it's heading. Most people miss these signals entirely because they're too busy scanning for the big obvious answer, the neon sign, the thunderclap of clarity. But clarity in this phase rarely arrives as thunder. It arrives as whisper, as a flicker, as the faint pull towards something you can't yet justify with logic. So starting now, I want you to consider a different kind of attention. Not searching outward for someone to hand you your next 5 years, but listening inward, gently, the way you'd listen for a sound in another room. Patient, unhurried, willing to hear something faint before it becomes something loud. What have you been quietly curious about that you've dismissed as impractical? Who have you been unexpectedly drawn to, in conversation or example, that you haven't examined closely? Where, in the last few weeks, did a strange and unfamiliar peace move through you, even for a moment? These are not distractions from your becoming. They are the becoming, speaking in the only language it currently has. And this is where something remarkable starts to happen, usually much later than people expect, usually only visible in hindsight. The way a forest only reveals its pattern once you're finally standing above it. You start to realize that nothing was wasted. That failed relationship you still sometimes replay at night, wondering what you could have done differently. It wasn't a wrong turn. It was a redirection, removing you from a life that would have quietly suffocated the self you were meant to become. That career disappointment, the promotion that didn't come, the plan that collapsed right when you thought it was finally solid, it wasn't punishment. It was initiation, forcing you to separate your identity from your job title long before you would have chosen to on your own. That loneliness, those long stretches of silence where it felt like no one truly understood you. It wasn't proof that something was wrong with you. It was self-knowledge being forged in the only conditions deep self-knowledge has ever been forged in, solitude. And that confusion, this very fog you might be standing in right now, it is not the opposite of transformation. It is transformation. Wearing a disguise you haven't learned to recognize yet. Loss becomes redirection, failure becomes initiation, loneliness becomes self-knowledge, confusion becomes transformation. Every single thing you have quietly grieved as a detour may in time reveal itself as the exact path you're becoming required, not despite the pain but through it. This is not a comforting story laid over your suffering to make it easier to swallow. This is again and again across countless lives, across the long historical record of every person who has ever walked through a genuine identity collapse and come out the other side, simply what tends to be true. The wound and the doorway are more often than not the same shape, so let's return now to where we began. What if the reason you feel lost right now is because you were never meant to find your way back? You weren't. Because going back was never the point. The old self served its purpose. It carried you here to this exact threshold and now its work is finished. It is not a tragedy that it's dissolving. It is the sign that something inside you finally became ready for what comes next. You are not falling behind the people around you, the ones who seem to be moving forward in straight, visible lines. You are simply on a different kind of timeline, one measured not in milestones but in depth. One where the most important progress happens exactly where no one, including you, can fully see it yet. You are not broken. You are not lazy. You are not lost in the way you've been telling yourself you're lost. You are in the chrysalis. You are beneath the waterline. You are the tree in winter, doing the invisible work that will one day be impossible to ignore. And one day, not on the timeline you would have chosen, not according to the old scorecard you finally started to release, you will look back at this exact season, this quiet, disorienting, formless in-between, and you will understand it not as the time you were falling apart. You will understand it as the time you were finally quietly becoming who you were always meant to be.